Well, hello you bearded bastards, and allow me to welcome you to Athira Etha, the plane of prophecy. Elven words, you know, Athira Etha. Some think the elves were the first to walk Athira Etha, and so were the first to name this realm, or maybe it was just them who were first to speak. That could be the case. But, I mean, who's to say, really? Just an interesting little tidbit there. The first of many today, I'm thinking, because today we're not going to be looking in on a dwarven fortress. No. Today we're going to be heading over to Copperdots, former capital of the Lancer of Oiling, and home of Luk Raval, the insightful sanctuary. The only library that exists in Athira Etha. The only one worth visiting anyways. It's a place where the greatest minds gather to discuss and explore thoughts and ideas, history, future, topics both grounded and severely abstract. But the things we have the most interest in today are the historical aspects of things, especially in relation to recent events. As I was just saying, Copperdots is our former capital. Only a few years ago, our capital became Northbridge, a relatively new and ambitious fortress built up to the north a ways. It's a bridge that spans the sea. Quite a spectacle. But with all these new changes, we figured we'd go through and sort out our records, get some of the reports from Northbridge squared away. It seems there's been a few beast attacks lately. Plus we have the ongoing war with the circular terror goblins, and the new conflict that just arose with the tame canyon elves. Yeah, it's been a busy few years for us dwarves. And so on behalf of Athel Great Tour, our king, we're gonna get things sorted out. How's that sound? Good? I sure hope so, because we have an awful lot to get through, and to be frank, this library is a mess. So we're just going to shoot from topic to topic, I think, just peeking in and grabbing what little interesting stories we can. But where to start is the question. Well, how about right here, in the insightful sanctuary itself, located high in the mountains in the northeast of the sizzling land, in Copperdots, former capital of the Lancer of Oiling. We are perched here high in the fancy tooth, and the walls of this place were hewn from the surrounding stone in 54, during the reign of Queen Dumed, first queen of the Lancer of Oiling, and mother of our current king, Athel Great Tours. The library itself is 62 years old now, and has hosted a variety of scholars from all across Athira Etha. The first scholar came in 55, Ficod Bridgedrims, famed philosopher. It was Ficod who was the first in the world to discover the discourse on the nature of events, truly a boon to those wishing to argue scholarly topics. And of course we've also had Olova Watchbud, the elf, famed naturalist. Olova was the first person ever to discover the migratory patterns of animals, as well as the embryological development of creatures. Not quite dwarven subject matter, but our halls are open to all who wish to learn, and Athira Etha is better for that. And we've had scholars in and out all these years too. The most recent scholar to come here was in 99, Vabok Righteous Paints, mathematician. She was the first in the world to discover the algorithm for dividing one number into another, possibly yielding a remainder. And she brought that knowledge with her when she went to Northbridge, helped in its construction from what I understand. Briefly, anyways. Sadly, it is reported that she died, only about a year after going there. Fell off the bridge, I guess. A freak accident. Bound to happen. Not something that would happen here, within these great halls. Copperdots is a much better place for a library. They don't even have one at Northbridge. Societal decay in full swing. But yes, I'm sure they'll get one in time. Learning was always very important to Queen Dumed back during her reign. Which is what I suppose we should move on to next. Copperdots itself, and for that we should go back to the very beginning, in year 1, back in that dark and terrifying time, at the very start of recorded history. Of course our people and the whole of Athira Etha existed before then, but the year 1 was a very important date, as it marked the rise of the goblins and their demonic overlords. And in that year we saw the creation of many different empires, all formed around the idea of protecting themselves from the demonic threat, and one of those was the Lancer of Oiling. Our people, led by Queen Dumed, who saw very clearly the need for a central gathering point for our people, and so up in the fancy tooth she founded Copperdots. Now the early years weren't easy, obviously. All the mining, organization, and we here at Copperdots suffered several attacks by monstrous animals and other various beasts. Attacks by the voracious cave crawler Dat come to mind. Voracious cave crawlers are fairly unremarkable most of the time, but we were still getting settled here, and those attacks were fairly harrowing. Not to mention the attacks by the dusk troll Berry Shades, a foul creature that's been walking Athira Etha for many thousands of years, we think. That particular one seemed to like to focus on us a little too much, but eventually went off and started bothering other parts of the world. But yes, those little hiccups didn't hold us back that long. During that time, we were able to make accommodations for our dwarves, rooms and meeting halls, as well as a couple of guild halls. The first guild ever formed here in Copperdots was the Weaponsmith Guild, housed in the Charm of Halls, followed up by the Bowyer Guild and the Geared Wheel. You gotta be able to attack in order to defend, right? An old adage of the Lancer of Oiling, and a saying that served us very well during those early days, just fending off beast attacks and whatnot. And we saw many beast attacks during the creation of Prince Basements, our second major fortress. It's not too far away, and in the same year as its founding, we were able to connect it up to Copperdots using an underground tunnel. An astounding achievement, as nothing like that existed in the world previously, that we know of anyways. Still, I suppose we should have seen the bad that might have come from such a groundbreaking achievement, quite literally, as it seems that somewhere along that process we awoke a beast from down below. Shedem Ogezdamid Rakashashash. Shedem Whole Witches, the sinful jackal. The only one of its kind. It was described as being an enormous blob composed of mud with 3 narrow tails. It moved with squirming and fidgeting motions, and along with it came a cloud of deadly dust. According to reports, the thing leaked out of the cavern walls after we finished the road, well, a few years after we finished the road between Prince Basements and Copperdots, and after the thing appeared, it laid a savage siege on Copperdots. We think the thing was mostly just hungry. It came in and killed a bunch of dwarves and devoured a bunch of animals and, well, devoured the dwarves as well. But luckily, the thing didn't stick around for long after that. It got its fill and then squirmed back out into the darkness of the caverns. We were safe, but maybe a bit too complacent. We were happy to be rid of the creature, obviously, but maybe we should have got some more defensive measures in place during those intervening years. We're straying a little bit. Back to Copperdots. Yes, Queen Dumed and the Lancer of Oiling had a bunch of astounding achievements during those early days, consolidating our power, constructing new fortresses, protecting ourselves against dangerous animals and monsters and whatnot. But after Shedem's attack, we started realizing that maybe the goblin/demonic threat wasn't as big a deal as everyone had made it out to be. They certainly weren't bothering us anyways. In fact, no other empire has ever tried to attack Copperdots. Well, besides a couple piddling attacks in the past couple decades, but they haven't been much of anything. These mountains are incredibly peaceful and extremely rugged. You'd be a fool to try to attack us here, but that's besides the point. It seemed like everyone else in the world was having problems with each other, and most of those new empires that had popped up in year 1 were squabbling amongst themselves over their meager affairs. And so that being the case, we tried to make the best of our little home up here, and it's around this time that our culture really began to coalesce. Stories were written down, songs were sung, and a lot of that had to do with the Rough Festival, a yearly ceremony that we hold here in Copperdots. Oh, it's wonderful. If you've never seen it, I would really recommend coming down at some point. We hold it in granite every year, and it involves incense burning, costumes, candles, recitals of the Satin of Sweetness, and performances of the wondrous verses. And of course, everyone's favorite part is an event featuring the telling of the story of the killing of the elf Raynuna Drinksmiles by the dwarf mercenary Dusum Ringtrammel. My goodness, the dwarves really get into that one. It's kind of an odd tale to tell, really. Raynuna was the first druid of the Mountain of Helms, an elven civilization. Different than those tame canyon elves that have been giving us trouble lately. But yes, Dusum was a mercenary that was working for the Rosy Nightmare, which is one of the goblin civilizations. Dusum wasn't quite what you'd call a hero, or even a very skilled fighter, to be perfectly frank. But it was he who was able to kill Raynuna, in some fashion. That fashion being extremely unclear. And that's part of the event, really. People like to retell this story again and again, coming up with ever more colorful ways that Dusum may have killed Raynuna. And then shortly after was killed by a voracious cave crawler himself. You got action, you got drama, you got real historic events for the most part, and you got comedy, in a manner of speaking. I mean, a dwarf did die, but everyone has fun at the Rough Festival, and that's all that really matters. Back on track, how about we just kind of pin ourselves down for now? I realize this story of Copperdots so far has been a bit rambly, and so yes, let's focus on our Queen, Dumed, who was reveling in this golden age of the dwarves. She was the one who brought her people together and allowed our culture to flourish in peace up here. And something I have not yet mentioned up to this point is that up till now, Queen Dumed had given birth to quite a few offspring. Many little royals were skittering around the fortress, 12 of them, many of whom did not survive for all too long, unfortunately, due to a number of terrible events. But of her 5 offspring who are still alive today, the youngest one was born in 52. Her son, Athel Great Tours, current king of the Lancer of Oiling, who resides now at Northbridge. Now, it must be mentioned that our young king did not have things easy, certainly not at the very start. Just months after entering Athira Etha, he was attacked by the alligator known as Slexmool. How did it come to be that young Athel and Slexmool the terrible alligator crossed paths? Well, history's a little unclear about that, but all that matters is that Athel escaped, with the knowledge that Idrath smiled upon him. Truly a boon of wealth if we ever saw one. Of course, it wasn't a boon that lasted for all too long, because misfortune was yet to rear its ugly head again. Athel's father, Dodak, always a flighty one, some say he never quite cared for residing in the shadow of the queen, wanted to create his own legend maybe, and so he set off on his own after divorcing Dumed. And it is a shameful thing, but Athel's father took up with a coven of necromancers, and has never been seen again. At the current time, he's considered to be lost, but hopefully those foul necromancers didn't play any tricks with his deceased remains. It would certainly be a dark turn if the father of the king showed up again in Copperdots or Northbridge. But yes, back on track. Despite being blessed with some form of luck, little Athel did not have it easy from the start. But you know what makes things a bit easier? A good friend. Now Athel did have a few childhood friends, but one of the most influential was Logum Helmspiral. They became friends in their teenage years, and shared similar interests. Those two would always hang around together, and after a few years of talking, they finally did it. They each joined a guild. Athel joined the Blacksmith Guild, while Logum joined the Weaponsmith Guild. They had kind of a friendly rivalry thing going on, but it worked out great for the both of them, and each of them acquired a good amount of skill in their craft. That being said, I don't want to put down our king at all, of course, but it was Logum who made and presented to the queen one of the most important symbols of her power, a silver short sword. All craftsdwarfship was of the highest quality, and it was decorated with the finest leopard bone. Its name was Bibanalis, ball kisses, and it was a treasured artifact of our people. But like all four symbols of the monarch's power to date, it too is lost, stolen by the thieves of Soul's Hollow. We'll get it back one day. The others too, I'm sure. Just gonna take some time, of course. Back to Athel. Logum and he had a very tight friendship and rivalry going on, but before long, another interest arose for our young king. Her name was Bemble, a bowyer, and soon after meeting the dashing young king, the two of them became lovers. It was a bit of a whirlwind there, and the two were quite taken with one another, and of course their skills complemented each other too. One making weapons, the other making crossbows. It was a thing of beauty. Surely the two of them were brighter than they've ever been, which is saying something of Bemble, as even during these romantic times, she was known to be quite a dark dwarf. Distant, just part of her nature, I suppose. Regardless, the two of them got along quite well, and they each seemed quite taken with the other, and so they were married, the young king-to-be and his queen. But Bemble's darkness yet remained, and some say it only intensified. In 79, Bemble was stricken with a need to create an artifact, a powerful urge from deep within. That time seemed to coincide with the very depths of her dark mood, and the other dwarves could see it, as Bemble began to skulk and brood around Copperdots. The pressure for a dwarf to create an artifact is something nigh inexplainable, even to dwarves. Knowing you only have the one chance to create your life's work takes a lot out of a dwarf, and it wasn't a pressure that Bemble's mind could bear. They say she went mad during that process, and according to contemporary reports, she attacked Rovad Nobleearthen, latest consort to the queen. Now he was able to escape, but it was our queen Dumed who stopped Bemble. Athel's mother, the queen, killed his wife, Bemble. It was an unexpectedly dark turn in the king's life, and proved once again that Idrath's blessings could only go so far. What followed was a brief period of Athel focusing on his work, forming business rivalries, and trying his best to keep his mind off of his depression. But it wasn't too long before another dwarf entered his life, Sarvesh Painted Breeds, our current queen, but at the time she was a presser from the hillocks known as Inked Sons. Sarvesh and Athel were quite taken with one another, and once again the union began to form into something more. It didn't take long for the wedding bells to ring once again. The two were wed, Athel and Sarvesh, future king and queen of the Lancer of Oiling. But as we've well learned at this point, with every upturn in Athel's story comes an equal drop. The queen Dumed died, taken by time, and so the mantle of ruler and her last remaining treasure, symbol of her authority, was passed on to Athel. Berul Utir, the bastion of loot, a pipe opal puzzle box. All craftsmanship was of the highest quality. It was studded with aluminum and encircled with bands of sterling silver. Would his reign be just? Would his legends hold strong? He had a lot to live up to, and the burden, even today, is great. And after taking the throne, it didn't take long for the real burdens of leadership to begin piling onto Athel. Copperdots remained fairly stable, except for a number of armed incursions by human bandits, ever hungry for dwarven treasures. It was they who made off with a couple of our artifacts previously, including revered ball kisses. It was a lot to bear for the king, and during that time the dwarves of Copperdots had to remain ever wary, for thieves prowled the halls. While this was happening, however, a new fortress had been founded, up to the north, away from the fancy tooth, at the very northern tip of this sizzling land. Idrath Kor Irol Sazir, Treasure Cavern, the North Bridge, or North Bridge as it's now known. Every year the traders would head out and return home with wonderful treasures, and stories of amazing architectural feats. Year after year the merchants returned telling these stories, showing off these gifts, and so it was that the course became clear to Athel. Although Northbridge had been built in a dangerous location, and its construction was already causing trouble with our neighbors, what better place could there be to build the legend? Instead of remaining scared in Copperdots, Athel and his entourage traveled to Northbridge, making it his throne, and the new seat of power for the Lancer of Oiling dwarves. And as one final break from tradition, Athel took his last remaining treasure, Beryl Utir, the pipe opal puzzle box, and destroyed it upon his arrival. It was a treasure that could never be stolen, and one whose story would end with Athel. A new age for the Lancer of Oiling would begin now, at Northbridge. Praise be to Idrath and the dwarves of the Lancer of Oiling. And that pretty much brings us up to the current day, 5th of Granite 116. Oh, and one little last bit of information. Not only did King Athel and Queen Sarvesh move to Northbridge, but it seems Athel is reconnected with an old friend there. Logum Helmspiral is the head weaponsmith of Northbridge, and it was with his help that the king's new quarters were constructed up on top of the bridge, an enormous chamber made of pure, solid iron. It's just always interesting to see things come full circle like that. I'm sure Logum never expected to see the king when he first moved to Northbridge, but there they are now, living together under Idrath's glorious light. Now that took a little longer than I thought it would, the whole story of Athel and Dumed. That being said, I think now it's time we switch focus. Now that we have some context for the creation of our people, and of Northbridge, our capital, as well as our king and former queen, I'm thinking now we should have a look at some things that were seen recently in Northbridge, and you can bet we're going to jump around a whole bunch too. Don't expect a solid narrative here. Now then, where to start? Well, how about our current enemies, the empires that have been riled up since Northbridge's founding? For one, we have the Circular Terror, a goblin empire. Now these days we've been butting heads with those guys, but historically we've had no problems with their people. Not until recently, and not totally due to Northbridge either, but we'll get to that soon. I think a better place to start would be the very beginning, and the dwarven goddess known as Akam, the Fortunate, a deity that occurs in the midst of the Autonomous Mansion. They're a different people altogether, not part of the Lancer of Oiling. Now, for the Autonomous Mansion, Akam is believed to be associated with luck and gambling, and according to legend, in a state of flighty amusement, Akam aided the gecko demon Wealthy Death the Contingent in becoming a permanent part of the living world, just on a whim. This ritual took place in Searchblade, using Lucky Pearl. Now I know that's a lot of information to take in, but let's break it down. The gecko demon Wealthy Death is better known as Ranorethi Toli, and is born from the very essence of luck and gambling, and you had better believe that Ranorethi knows this fact very well. The only one of its kind, thankfully. It appears to be a huge gecko twisted into humanoid form with external ribs, and also a terribly bloated body. Its slate gray scales are jagged and overlapping, and the thing is also said to have a poisonous sting. After being brought into the world, Ranorethi Toli now stands as a living deity for the goblins of the Circular Terror, and Ranorethi is often associated with luck, games, gambling, suicide, and death. A dark and foul creature to be sure. And when Ranorethi Toli was wrenched into this mortal plane by Akam, it appeared in Searchblade, a vault belonging to Akam, and filled with her servants. Its location is unknown, but it is said that deep within this vault, there is a legendary earthenware slab known as Ika Ye Mai, or Lucky Pearl. If one were to locate this vault, brave its terrors, and recover this slab, on it is the true name of Ranorethi Toli, and uttering it would banish the beast. But as of this current time, not a soul could say where this place is. But back to our focus, Ranorethi and the Circular Terror. The first thing this monster did upon entering Athira Etha and won was thrust a spire of Slade up from the underworld, a spire that it named the Fortress of Chance. In doing so established a gateway between worlds, both Athira Etha and the underworld below. Now with the stage set, one would think that Ranarathi Toli would unleash its power against Athira Etha, and it did, in a manner of speaking, in the form of the goblins. Now, when it comes to the goblins, we're still fairly unsure where they came from. Either they were brought into Athira Etha alongside Ranarathi Toli and the other demon lords in year 1, or they were here all along, which is a distinct and disconcerting possibility. And I should note here too that not all goblins are pure evil. There are plenty of goblins in Athira Etha that live alongside dwarves even. Scholars, religious leaders, respected crafts goblins. It's just their cultures of origin. They're often terribly cruel, twisted to reflect the whims of their demon lords, I would think. But yes, it wasn't long before the goblins of the Circular Terror started making new settlements here and there, dark goblin pits, littered with trenches and spires. And for the most part, it was these goblins and their individual leaders that would cause trouble, ransacking settlements of humans, dwarves, elves, stirring up all manner of trouble, but not an apocalyptic sort of trouble. It was thought, and with good reason, that the arrival of the demon lords would cause the end of Athira Etha, but really it's all amounted to, just a minor nuisance? Compared to the end of the world, at least. Certainly if the demon lords were more proactive in their empire's antics, then we would all be in trouble. But this has not come to pass. In fact, back to Ranarathi Toli. Between the year 1 and year 30, Ranarathi itself did not do very much, besides delegating tasks and making a rough framework of government. Ranarathi seemed to spend most of its time just relaxing in the Fortress of Chance, playing idle card games with the goblins and engaging in bets here and there, perhaps. But that changed in year 30, when Ranarathi left its tower, and, strangely, visited Trotted Touches, a fairly new human town created by the Empire of Dales, the human group that's our closest allies. Now, Ranarathi did not destroy the place or even attack it, but instead attended the Festival of Perfecting, where they held a number of competitions. There was a foot race, a mace throwing competition, and most interesting to Ranarathi, there was also a wrestling competition, in which Ranarathi partook. Now, of course, with a demon lord attending, there wasn't much in the way of competition that particular year, but there was one. Dotep Carmine Spread. Now, the legends get a little fuzzy as to the exact nature of this competition, how it played out and whatnot, but there's one thing that's made extremely clear. Dotep lost, as you would expect, leaving Ranarathi victorious, and giving everyone in attendance something to remember for the rest of their lives. The demon lord versus the human. An unforgettable tale. Surprisingly, a good time was had by all, including Ranarathi, who afterwards returned to the Fortress of Chance and continued languishing away, year after year, not returning to Trotted Touches, which had quite a few of its own troubles itself. 3 years after that competition, the Bronze Colossus Ral Brave Masters attacked and destroyed Trotted Touches, leaving it a ruin, and it remained as such until nearly a decade later when it was reclaimed by the Empire of Dales. But it was again attacked, this time by the Hydra, Subi Saknite, who again destroyed Trotted Touches. It's hard to say what Ranarathi could have been thinking at this time. What is sure is that Ranarathi did not do much in these intervening years, and just spent most of its time at home, laying in darkness with the goblins. Until, that is, the year 64, when once again Ranarathi left that tower, and once again visited a human town of the Empire of Dales, for a festival. This time, though, the town was plate-sung, and the festival was the Olive Celebration, and a significant part of that celebration was its wrestling competition. Now, it's hard to say for sure what sparked this recent interest in wrestling, but what is known is that that human that dared wrestle Ranarathi all those years before had died just a couple years previously. It is not thought that Ranarathi and Dotep that human were friends, just acquaintances. They've only met that one time that we know of. But something of great interest is that Ranarathi partook in this wrestling competition, of course, and once again only one human dared step forth against Ranarathi. That human was Kiznast Dimplecasket, second eldest son of Dotep Carmine Spread, the previous competitor. Now, once again, the exact details of the competition are a bit murky, but Ranarathi won that year, as you would expect. But this time, instead of heading back to its tower and cutting off the rest of the world, the demon returned the following year in 65, where again it partook in the wrestling competition, where again Kiznast was the only competitor other than the demon. Ranarathi won, once again of course, and once again returned to its tower, until the following year, 66, where the demon in Kisnast fought once more, with Ranarethi coming out the winner. And this continued to happen as well. 68, 69, 70, 71, and eventually the two formed sort of a rivalry and a friendship, perhaps, over a shared love of athletics. This is what's written. Year after year after year, the two fought against one another, and year after year, Ranarethi would win. Not that it seemed to matter to either. They were in it for the pure love of athletics after all. However, not all was good between the empires of man and goblin. Tensions were beginning to rise, and this peace would not last forever. For in the midsummer of 100, the strifeful war began. It was a war waged by the humans against the goblins, a conflict that began over a dispute regarding the goblins' propensity for devouring the bodies of sapient beings. And it was during one of these battles in Platesung that Kisnast was killed. And it wasn't long before other human nations joined the war as well. The Confederacy of Marbles, the Humble Kingdom, and the Empire of Dales all began fighting against the goblins of the Circular Terror. And so it was that those peaceful days of wrestling competitions came to a close. Quite a shame. Puzzlingly, however, those human nations are still fighting with the goblins to this day, and the goblins must be doing fine because they don't seem to be fighting back against the humans all too much, but it was just a couple years ago that they chose to lash out at us dwarves, the Lancer of Oiling, when they started sending groups out against Northbridge. I don't know why they'd choose to stretch themselves thin like that, but there must be some cruel logic in it. Silly bastards. But yes, that's where we are at the current day. Local human empires fighting against the goblins who are fighting us for some reason. But then we have the elves, who we have not yet to this point said much about. But whom about there is an awful lot to say, and very little of it is good. Let it be known that the Tame Canyon elves, our current enemies, are a dangerously warlike people. Capricious too, highly unpredictable. They seem to start wars on a whim, always due to some sort of a disagreement about natural something or other. Lumber disagreements about the treatment of animals. I don't know what the hell they're warring with us now for. As we understand it, they started attacking the dwarves of Northbridge for little reason. There was a lumber agreement set up, and those dwarves were playing by the rules. And yet here we are, see, capricious. And foolish. A lot of people think they're insane. And for good reason, too. The elves tend to butt heads with other people due to a number of beliefs. And to put it as simply as possible, the elves kind of believe in a natural circle. Living things are born, whether plant or animal. They live, and then they die. And then plants or animals consume the dead and return to life. It's a big wheel, and that wheel powers the entirety of existence. Now, humans and dwarves actively take things out of that wheel. We use natural resources to create things that aren't intended to return to the wheel. Structures and crafts and weapons and armor. And we tend to like to burn things to use for fuel, right? Humans and dwarves, to the elves, are a blemish on the natural order. Also, this is a bit of speculation here, as it's not said outright, but elves do not have an end to their natural life. They're immortal creatures that can live indefinitely, and don't even have a need to eat or drink, though they still do so, and are notable for their acts of cannibalism. But still, yes, they're immortal creatures, and as such, it is speculated that they go to war in order to bring an end to their own lives. This would also answer why their armor is made out of wood. Grown wood, I should have mentioned too. It's not cut wood. They don't kill trees. It's all carefully tended stuff. The elves go to war en masse wearing wooden armor so that they themselves can return to the natural wheel, and they adorn their mortal coils with wood, further fueling the wheel upon their passing, acting as a bit of fertilizer, pretty much. And so yes, these people are born into the world, and their entire purpose is to continue the cycle of the natural order, in most cases. It is fascinating, but also very disturbing, and in some ways a lot more disturbing than even the goblins and their demon leaders. But if it's peace they want, the world's people would be glad to indulge. Same goes if they desire war, though. We would not hesitate for a moment to send them back to that natural cycle of theirs. Yeah, but yes, that there is an exhaustive but not complete rundown of our current situation. There are actually quite a few things we've left out, but there will always be time for more. It is a large library after all, with many bits of information still left uncovered. So yes, we will return here one day, but for now we bid farewell to the insightful sanctuary and the knowledge held within, and return to Athira Etha, where it is reported that a new dwarven fortress is about to be founded by a few mad dwarves from the Lancer of Oiling, hunters of great beasts from what we've heard. We'll have to keep our eyes open. I'm sure they'll have stories to tell, and we'll be here to record it all. And now we're going to switch over to talking about some behind the scenes things. Okay, haven't done a Legends mode episode in a while, and let me say straight off the bat, I know this one got a bit tangled. But really, that's just the nature of Legends mode in Dwarf Fortress, I think. There's just so many bits of information all over the place, and in order to convey it, like, you either gotta try to form stuff into a script and make a narrative, which is not my bag, nor do I think it would work out very well in most cases, or just kind of go with the flow and swing from one bit of information to the other, which is what I did here, and it's what I enjoy. A little jarring at points, I'm sure, but hopefully I conveyed some of the interesting bits to you. I feel like I myself have a much better grasp of the context of the whole situation here in Athira Etha now, so that's good. That's something I really needed. Makes things a bit more tangible, and I like that an awful lot. That being said, can I just say it is a gigantic pain in the ass to sort through Legends mode, even with those links. Like, the links are great. The Steam version links is what I'm talking about, like the little blue bits of text and whatnot. They can just zip you from one little bit of information to the other, which I like. That's good. But one of my biggest problems, I think, is the information that is shared on those pages. Sometimes, like, some pages share bits of information that others don't, even when talking about the same topic. And it can be a real bastard to figure out where to look sometimes. Sometimes if I have a lead on a bit of information I want to follow up on, I have to reference like 3 different pages to even get a good feel of what might have happened. Like, well, for an example, one of the tabs on there is Chronicles by Age. If you click that, you could see everything that happened in a given age. And one of the interesting parts of that tab right there, to me, is the listing of all the conflicts and wars and battles and all that sort of stuff. And you can click any one of those and see a whole rundown of like a given battle, or even see what war that battle was a part of, which is really neat, and will tell you the exact number of people that were lost in each battle, and even why wars were started. And there's a number of reasons why wars can start. I don't have a list of them, but they could be like territorial disputes or arguments about ethical reasons and stuff. It's pretty cool. But like when you go to a site page, it doesn't show that conflict or anything. It'll just say this group attacked this group at this date. I want to know from that page like what war that was part of, you know? Or if it was not part of a war at all, I'd like to know that too. Frequently, I'd have to go to a site page, like a site of a fortress or something like Northbridge, and I would see something like the goblins of the Circular Terror attacked the dwarves of Northbridge on this date. But then I would have to go back to the Chronicles by Age and check for that date. And it doesn't say at that point, like, this group attacked this group. It just says the name of the battle occurred. So I'd have to check each of the battles that happened on that date and look for the one where the goblins were attacking the dwarves, you know? If that makes any sense. It's super, super tedious. I mean, I'm glad I could do it, but like, Legends mode is already really dense and hard to digest. If that information was categorized better, it'd be a lot more interesting to a lot more people, I think. Legends mode is one of the coolest parts of Dwarf Fortress, knowing that everything that you could see in Fortress mode has the possibility of like having an entire history associated with it. You could never know. Speaking of which, okay, so like Northbridge in this world, the fortress we just got finished with, there was that dwarf Logum Helm Spiral, a pretty unnotable dwarf for the most part. He was there right at the beginning, showed up in one of the first migrant waves, a very skilled weaponsmith. I made note of it in the episode when he showed up. And he ended up being like our head weaponsmith of the entire fortress. Ended up making like all of the spears for our dwarves and a lot of the weapons and a whole bunch of stuff. It was really cool to see that he was childhood friends with Athel. That being said, like while we were playing, they didn't really interact ever. And I don't think they were friends like in the fortress. I mean, they could have been, but like it wasn't anything stellar. So that right there kind of creates a narrative in a way, you know, like they were friends when they were kids, it, you know, it's kind of formative thing, but now here we are in the future and they've kind of grown apart in a way, which is interesting. Gotta wonder what they think about each other now, you know? I actually did want to look into a lot more during this episode, but just ran out of time. I thought for sure I'd be able to fit everything in and then some, but no such luck. It just, you start picking at one little aspect and more comes out. It's crazy. Like, you know, I start looking at copper dots, I look at the queen, I see Athel. He was attacked by an alligator, he was friends with Logum. Logum made this artifact, the artifact got stolen. Just one thing after the other, you know, and like, I don't know, I guess that's what I like about Legends mode, as I said before. Just swinging from one little aspect to the next one. Seeing how everything is connected up in this big world, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. Like, okay, actually something that doesn't make sense, kind of frustrating, is that, well, as I was saying before, you could see the battles and wars and stuff. I was trying to look up why the Tame Canyon attacked Northbridge, but I couldn't find a reason or anything like that. Like, well, I should say, I could never find an instance of them attacking Northbridge in Legends mode, which is absolute nonsense. They absolutely did attack us several times, but it doesn't show up in Legends mode. It showed the goblins attacking, it showed the human merchants arriving, it showed the elven merchants arriving, but it never showed the elves attacking. It just completely cut out of Legends mode for some reason. Very odd. I saw many instances of the Tame Canyon attacking other people, just not Northbridge itself. I have to assume that's some sort of a bug or something. I don't see why it would be omitted like that. But such is the way of Dwarf Fortress. Constant work in progress. I'm sure it'll all be sorted out at some point in the indeterminate future. We can only hope anyways. Anywho, my bearded bastards, I thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of episodes like this. I'm sure they're not up everyone's alleys, but I do quite like them myself. So yes, I'm pretty interested in seeing what you think. Gonna keep things rolling in this world, Athira Etha. And I think I have some ideas for the next fortress, but I guess we'll have to see. I hope you enjoyed yourselves today, and I certainly hope to see you next time, my bearded bastards, in Athira Etha. And until then, you bearded bastards,